wonderful, wonderful Christmas list, which we kind of need right now, don't you think? Y'all have heard the old saying, the best laid plans of mice and men. I usually pick a talk title and a topic a month or more in advance, and the basic structure of the talk well in advance, and sometimes what you plan gets overshadowed by world events, overtaken or overshadowed by world events. Seems to be something that's happening just about every week. Paris, Colorado Springs, and this week, a little closer to home, so to speak, down in San Bernardino. Makes it difficult to stick to a talk title when you got something like that looming over it all. But that's the talk title. All I Want for Christmas. Actually, All I Want for Christmas Is. And well, what the heck? Let's try it. All I want for Christmas is an end to the craziness. I mean, is that too much to ask for? Or how about this? All I want for Christmas is a transformed global consciousness. Is that too much to ask for? Okay, I'll be a little more specific. How about this? All I want for Christmas is a world that operates based on reason and evidence instead of emotion and ideology, because that really seems to be what's going on here. I can't really fault the news media for simply reporting the news about all the mass shootings, but then the spinmeisters get involved. And they all seem to have the same message, whether they're trying to sell guns or regulate guns. They have the same method of operation. The emotion they play off of, the emotion they play off of is fear, and the ideology that they play off of is that violence is everywhere and it's getting worse, and so you need to run out and do something. Whatever that might happen, whatever it is they happen to be trying to sell. Violence is everywhere, it's getting worse. And you know what? They're wrong. For all that we hear, they are wrong. I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture here. The violence is bad, but it's not increasing. Maybe this particular kind of incident is on the rise, and I'm not even sure about that. But based on facts and evidence, when we get the emotions and the ideology out of the way, we have actually had a huge decline in gun violence in this country. And it's decreased significantly over the past 10 years. Here's the statistics on this. Deaths by firearm per 100,000 people, all ages. Last 10 years, from 1993 through 2013. 15.2 down to 10.6. Now that top line includes suicide, so you take suicide out of the picture and just focus on the homicide rate. It goes from 7.0 to 3.6, almost cut in half during that time frame. That's fairly significant, and in fact, violence overall on the next slide here, you can see violence overall, the non-fatal violent firearm crime victimization, that's a mouthful, but it's gone down significantly over that same time frame. This time they got the statistics going through 2014. That's a huge drop. That is a huge drop, and that's not what we seem to be hearing on the news and different places around us. But there it is, and I'll tell you, these numbers, they didn't just pull these numbers out of a hat. Here, the next slide. That's the source was the CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control, as well as the Pew Research Center. They have some pretty good credentials when they do this kind of statistical work. So this is significant. But, however, if you need more than that, here's a book that I've talked about before, which I highly recommend. This one here, called The Better Angels of Our Nature: Why Violence Has Declined. That's by Steven Pinker. That's a huge book, 800 pages long. It is chock full of statistics, packed solid with statistics if you're into that kind of thing. So the information is there. People need to hear this. If they're not getting it from the mainstream media, then they ought to be hearing it here. You might be wondering, well, what's he doing up there spouting these statistics today? Well, isn't that our mission? We're here to advance a positive message. So they need to hear it. People cannot thrive when they're being manipulated by fear and misinformation. You can't think clearly. Violence is declining. And that's not an invitation to become complacent. It's meant to be a message of hope. It's meant to inspire action. Violence is declining, but how are we doing in the United States compared to the rest of the world? Check this out. That long yellow line is gun murders in developed countries listed in Human Development Index order. That's the United States, that big long yellow line. All the other countries there, yeah. Isn't that interesting? I look at that and I think, what the heck is wrong with us? I mean, that's embarrassing. That is just plain embarrassing. It's something to be concerned about. Makes me wonder. And there's more work to do. Shows us that there's lots more work to do. And as usual, if we take a spiritual approach to these kinds of problems, it always starts at the level of the individual and at the level of consciousness. That's how it works. That's how it works. Okay, so I understand the need for better regulation, all right? I can read. And I have, in fact, read the Second Amendment, which refers to a well-regulated militia. Things don't seem to be well-regulated at all. That's only part of the problem. And it's not the starting point. The starting point is consciousness. Now, before the mass murders happened in San Bernardino, I was writing the talk for today based on the movie A Christmas Story. This one right here. One of my all-time favorite Christmas movies. It's on every year, right? You all know this. It's on for 24 hours a day on Christmas Eve on TBS. They run it 24 hours a day. I saw it in the theater when it first came out back in 1983, and I thought then it was an instant Christmas classic, an instant holiday classic. It's the story of 9-year-old Ralphie Parker and what he wants for Christmas. Instead of some big, long list, Ralphie wants just one thing for Christmas. And if you've seen the movie, you know what that is. Some people who have seen the movie maybe once or twice might say that what Ralphie wanted was a BB gun. But that wasn't it at all, was it? Oh no. Oh no. Ralphie didn't just want a BB gun. All right? If you're a super fan of the movie, you know what he wanted. What he wanted was this. He wanted an official Red Ryder carbine action 200-shot range model air rifle with a compass in the stock and this thing which tells time, right? That's what he wanted. And the idea that I was trying to get at the time that I was going to do this particular talk, the idea I was trying to get at was the importance and the value of being clear, exact, and specific about what we want. Ralphie was 100% clear and exact about what he wanted. And the point was, wouldn't it be great if we could bring that kind of clarity and focus into getting what we want out of life, not just at Christmas, but all year long? That was the plan, all right? That was the plan. Of course, you know from the movie, Ralphie, he runs into some challenges on his way to getting his precious BB gun. The adults around him, he says he wants a BB gun. You know what they all say, right? Remember what they say? You'll shoot your eye out, kid, right? And in the end, he almost does. First shot with the BB gun outside, it bounces off a metal sign and hits him on the cheek, right? I mean, it was a close call. So maybe the message there is be careful what you ask for, right? You just might get it. And I have to say that when the thing happened down in San Bernardino, it took on a whole different complexion. And I think maybe this year the movie is taking on a slightly different meaning in light of all of these mass shootings that we've been having, because it hit me like a bolt out of the blue, stopped me in my tracks. I thought to myself, with all this gun violence going on, I'm going to be talking about a movie where a little boy is literally worshiping a weapon. Okay, it's a BB gun, right? Sure. But it's meant to be a stand-in. It's meant to be a less deadly version of the real thing. Stopped me in my tracks. I thought, well, I can't do this now. What am I supposed to do with this? Well, and I started thinking about how in the movie, Ralphie, there's this great scene where he has this fantasy daydream. Remember the fantasy? Well, there's several of them, but the particular one, the daydream about where he uses his BB gun to defend his helpless family from the dreaded Black Bart and his gang of evil henchmen. They all come slithering over the fence in his backyard, right? His terrified and sniveling family, they're hiding under the kitchen table, including his father. But not Ralphie. Oh no, siree, not Ralphie. He's armed with his BB gun that he now calls Old Blue, right? He's armed with Old Blue, and he proceeds to pick off the bad guys one by one from the window over the kitchen sink. Remember that scene? There he is, Ralphie, the good guy with a gun, right? Amazing. It's a great scene. Very, very funny, actually, but now it raises some questions. It raises some questions. Hey, I know it's fiction, it's comedy, it's satire, I get it, and so does everyone here. This movie is not going to cause violence. Keep watching it, keep laughing, keep enjoying it, every single scene. In fact, as I got to thinking about this whole conundrum I was in, I realized that, you know what, I value this movie now more than ever. It's like taking an X-ray or an MRI of our collective culture, getting a glimpse of our conditioning, a glimpse of our collective consciousness. It's the kind of stuff that goes on inside my head when I watch a movie anyway. It's, you know, Ralphie, or at least the character Ralphie Parker in the movie, reflects, I think, the way most of us were conditioned as children and young adults. Certainly the way I was conditioned, the message that I received growing up. Somewhere along the line, we stopped looking at firearms as useful but dangerous tools. We turned them into something else. Instead of looking at firearms as useful but dangerous tools, the message we now get is that guns are fun. Guns are an unquestionable and absolute good thing in and of itself. And then we get the message that weapons are the solution to life's problems, big or small. Guns are good. Guns are desirable. Guns make you powerful. Guns make you the hero in your own fantasy story, and they solve your problems. And actually, the message goes deeper than that. It's more than just guns, it's violence. Our culture looks at violence as a solution. Violence is redemptive, which is strange at Christmas time, because one of the major themes of Christmas is peace on earth. Why just at Christmas? It seems to be the one time of the year that we dare to think that such a thing might be possible. Peace on earth. I mean, not some sort of a utopia where nothing violent ever happens. I don't see that as a possibility. How about just a world where violence isn't institutionalized and is used as the first resort when it comes to trying to settle our differences and disagreements or to push an ideology? Doesn't mean that we all have to become pacifists. You know, this idea of peace on earth doesn't mean that we have to become pacifists. In fact, Jesus really was not a pacifist. Despite all those things that he said about loving your enemies, turning the other cheek and things like that, Jesus said all those things while at the same time preaching that God would be the one who would come later and do the violence. God was going to come later with an army of angels to vanquish the enemies of Israel. So you get kind of a mixed message there. And maybe what we can conclude from that is that maybe sometimes the reasonable and ethical response to aggression is to use sufficient force to oppose it. But the key words are reasonable and ethical, not emotional and ideological. Fanaticism, extremism, radicalism of any kind is based on an appeal to emotion and is based on ideology that one is not to question. That's how it happens. Each year at Christmas, I like to mention a remarkable event that occurred 101 years ago now. It was the Christmas truce of 1914 during World War I. On Christmas Eve that year, the German and the English soldiers declared this spontaneous and very informal truce. The former enemies got out of their trenches and gathered in no man's land between the trenches, and they exchanged food and cognac and tobacco and postcards and things like that. That's all true. There's a little bit of a legend that they had a soccer game or something like that, which may or may not have happened, but the fact is that there was the truce and they did exchange little gifts and things like that. And it lasted until the New Year. It wasn't just a couple of hours, it lasted a few days, and after that the generals finally had to intervene in order to get them to start fighting again. Isn't that interesting? Crazy. Sounds crazy, but it really happened. There's something about the values that we celebrate at Christmas that have the potential to expand our circle of caring and compassion. Something about the values we celebrate at Christmas that foster understanding instead of condemnation. Wish we could bottle it. Can't, but I wish we could. And maybe the best thing that we can do is to work to keep that state of consciousness going for a little bit longer each year, a little bit longer next year, and so on and so forth. You know, peace on earth. The one time a year where we dare to think that such a thing is possible. And we need to make it more than just wishful thinking, right? We need to make it more than just wishful thinking. Thoughts and prayers. They're great, as long as we don't stop there. We need to work on becoming awake and aware at a deeper level of all of the ways that we, and I'm including myself in this, I'm not standing up here telling you that I think I'm immune to this stuff. We need to be more awake and aware of the ways that we can be manipulated and conditioned. We need to listen to the words of those who want to be our leaders and decide if they're part of the problem or if they have something rational and compassionate to offer instead of more appeals to emotion and ideology that is not to be questioned. We need to see the way our very culture reflects the ways that we've been conditioned to accept violence and the instruments of violence, and then talk about it. Don't just watch a movie. Let it speak to you. What is being revealed? How do I identify with that character? What does this tell me about our culture? What does this tell me about what's going on within me at the level of consciousness, perhaps in ways I haven't examined? Movies can do that. What is being revealed? What is being brought to the surface to be confronted? And if something is being brought to the surface to be confronted and it's a little bit uncomfortable for us, that's okay, because it's being brought to the surface to be healed. Can't be healed unless it's brought to the surface, acknowledged, and confronted. Then the healing can begin. So I'm going to give Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore the last word today. Many years ago, I think he envisioned the choice that faces us or awaits us now when he wrote this. We are now in the midst of a race transition in which we are taking a very pronounced upward swing in the development of the ideal man implanted in us in the beginning. A new concept of God, man, and the universe is upon us. We must realize all this and go upward with the mighty urge for higher things. Will God take us up to an imaginary heaven in a chariot of fire? Or do we use our mind to lift ourselves heavenward? I like having a choice. I know which one I choose. I know which one is on my Christmas list. See you next week.